10x, 10x, 10x. I keep on hearing this word 10x, 10x, 10x. And I've had the honor, the fortune to speak to one individual who does talk about it. And his name is Nader Sabri. We've spoken before in other interviews, and we do work on projects with my projects and his projects. We do work on it. And we do have this conversation about 10x, 10x, 10x. And honestly, when I hear the word 10x, I go, ugh. It just doesn't sound, it just sounds like a fashion and a fad. And I'll tell you why. The reason I see it as a fashion fad, I hear a lot of people say it. I see some famous individuals say 10x as well. And I can't see any practicality to this thing called 10x. I've gone into meetings and people talk about 10x just like a fashion word, just popping from here and there. And I'm like, I'm cringing inside that you have no idea what it means. Stop using it. It's, focus on your business. And so today we're going to talk with Nader Sabri to clear the myth, the BS, the lies which people have created about 10x, which are marketed by so many people, but they have no clue what it's all about. So Nader Sabri, thank you for being here and answering some questions for us. And these are going to be some intense questions because I personally think 10x is a total lie. It's a myth. It's a load of BS. I need it for the audience to be aware what really 10x is. And you need to prove me wrong that 10x actually does work and it does exist. And it's not what you hear in the industry out there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, we've had this talk offline multiple times, and I don't disagree from the direction you come from, and I understand why that is. There's a lot of smoking mirrors in this field. I mean, and it comes a lot from the personal development space and sales development space, which you know very well. And 10x is one of these things completely thrown around. It's a lot like innovation and strategy. They have a very specific background to them, but they're just thrown around as buzzwords. Or when you talk to somebody about blockchain, they start mixing up blockchain with cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence, all three different things, but they mix all three of them. And these are just buzzwords that get people's attention and obviously get people excited. And 10x is one of those things. And I mean, with all due respect to the gurus who've been pushing 10x, I do respect the fact that they've done a really good job in using it as a marketing tool and a really good job in making a lot of money out of it. But what happens, which is the reasons that you come from the position that you come from, and we've obviously had this conversation offline, is what the hell does it mean? People who've taken 10x courses and other 10x materials come out saying, well, I get what 10x is, but how, right? Is the big how. Yes. And one of the things for me, Rohit, when it comes to understanding the people around you. Okay, so first off, there's two types of people. There are experts and gurus. Experts are people who can explain to you complexity, and gurus are people who can simplify complexity. And the biggest problem with this particular definition is about people can tell you the what, but then ask them how, and you get a lot of blank answers. And so I challenge anybody listening to this, anyone talks about 10x, tell them, I get what it is. How do you do it? And that's what we'll discuss. That's how we're gonna dig into this.
Okay, before we go into the how, I want to understand for myself and for the audience, for the listeners, what is 10x?
What is it?
I mean, I'm talking about make it simple, make it straightforward. What exactly 10x is? Like you're explaining it to let's say a 10-year-old child can understand what 10x is. Can you do that for us?
I mean, it's as simple as rather than crawling, you're running. That's the difference. And I'll give you a bit of history so you understand the origins of this. It really comes from the space of innovation, actually. And in the area of innovation, they have a measurement they use, which is incremental versus radical change or movement. And essentially that alludes to the exact same thing as 10x. It means that there's an incremental way of doing things, and there's a way where you leap, you move at a faster higher, more further distance, but it's in multiples. That's the idea, and that's why they use 10. They don't use 5x or 1x or 10x. I mean, because 1x is multiple of 1 is twice, right? So 10x is a lot. And where this became popularized, just to give you a little bit of a history to this, was actually in an interview in the late 80s with Steve Jobs, actually. So believe it or not, you hear about Grant Cardone, all these guys talking about 10x, but the guy who really surfaced this to the general public was actually Steve Jobs. He was being challenged in an interview. It's not a very famous interview, funny enough, but it's out there. You can go search it up. And he's asked, like, what is so special about what is it that Apple does and the future of how you see Apple producing better products? And he says, well, we believe in this thing called 10x. And again, he asked, well, what is 10x? And he says, well, essentially 10x is that when and they take this from a product innovation perspective. So it's really important to understand the context on that. And I'll explain to you how that kind of fans out into everything else. But essentially, rather than adding a new feature to a product, right, it's just like an incremental move. What they want to do is they want to take a radical move. They want to completely change the way that you may interact with a feature that still may be the same feature. And one of the best examples are the gestures that are used on an iPhone. So a screen on a phone existed before an iPhone. And the screen served exactly the same purpose. And the screen looked and worked relatively the same, other than the fact when they 10x'd or radically changed the way the screen works, they were able to use gestures, which actually originates from another company. It has a whole different story where they bought the IP from. But nonetheless, the point was that this is a 10x move. A 10x move because now not also can I just see what's on my screen, I can interact with it. And that is a game changer. We take that for granted today. We would pick up a phone or any device and we expect that screen to work like that. But step back to the 1980s where having a screen was an extreme luxury on almost any device. And if you had a screen, it would be an LCD, not LCD, but an LED. You remember the little digital dots? And that was like the extent of it with a really nice light. And that would be like cutting edge. And if you look at some of the earlier ideas that Apple had and the way Steve Jobs saw 10X, he was looking at like, he has like an early 1980s design of an Apple Watch, of the iPod, not the iPod, sorry, but the iPad, even the iPhone. It goes back to the 80s. And he was using even the primitive technology they had at that time, but the vision was in place because he was thinking 10X, right? He was no longer looking at things incrementally. Put that into kind of metrics. What that means is rather than you looking at your business or whatever you're doing and increasing it by 1% or 3% or 5% or 25%, which sounds like a lot in some industries, that's incremental. When we look at things that are like 100% plus, you do it in multiples, we're now looking at 10x, right? That's really what it comes down to. Many organizations, because of their kind of industry standards and benchmarks, a 3% growth rate compared to an industry that grows at 0.5% or 0.2% is phenomenally different to that of the remaining of the industry. However, exponential growth and the science of growth, which I talk about, and you know that a lot about that, we talk about how large corporations, unicorns, even small startup companies use the science of exponential growth to be able to 10x what they do.
Okay. So just to clarify it, 10x is not about incremental.
Yeah, it's not about an incremental move. It's equivalent to that. Rather than you crawling, it's about you jumping real fast.
So if I was to put it in an analogy or a metaphor, let's say you are walking at the speed of, let's say, 1 or 2 steps. Yeah, like 1 step, 2 step, 1 step, and you're just taking it easy. Suddenly, all of a sudden, now you're taking 100 steps. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, instantaneously. Correct. Now,
the slow, it's
yeah, really fast. You got it.
Again, a metaphor. It's like a superhero like Flash. Yeah, you could speed of lightning. You could say that.
Absolutely. You got it. You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, if you're saying that it's 10x, does that also mean 10x in terms of fail fast?
Yeah, Well, now you're getting into the details of how, right? So what I love about your analogy is like, you know that it's not humanly possible for you to take 100 steps in one shot,
Yeah.
right? You still take one step at a time. And that's where the question, and as I mentioned, like we've just talked about what. Now we're going to dig into about how. And that's where this is all alluding to. And if I stood outside right now, anybody here, I mean, you tried to jump as far as you can.
Hold on.
Sorry?
Before we go to the how, why 10x? Why not 5x? Why not?
No. So remember, 10x is a metaphorical reference, by the way. It's a reference to multiples. That's it. Rather than less than a multiple, which is incremental, we're looking at a multiple. So it's not 1x or 5x. It uses the number 10 because it's a double digit number, and a 10 is a number that we all understand. So if you put 1x, most people wouldn't understand that, although that's double, which could be a lot for some people. In this case, it's 10x, which is obviously tenfold that amount. Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at the how. Let's look at how do you actually do 10x?
100%. So if I stepped outside right now, anybody watching this, and you just took one step and we measured that one step, and I said, okay, do that, multiply that by 10, but in one shot, can you do it? And if you tried, you physically wouldn't be able to do that, and for obvious reasons. And so this comes back to the example of how 10x actually works. In fact, its origins and the way of it works, it starts with incremental movements. And that shocks a lot of people, because when we look at the growth sciences and you're like, well, dude, you just told me to leap, but now you're telling me to take incremental moves. And what it comes down to is actually momentum. And momentum is essentially speeding up the process of your ability to take each one of those small steps even quicker. So rather than me just...
Give me an example. Theoretically, it sounds great. Give me an example.
Yeah. So we see this in all kinds of businesses where they're able to accelerate what they do. So one of the things that you know very well about, and we've done this in another interview, which is the definition of growth hacking. So the example is I put one unit of effort and I get 4 units of results out of it. And so this is called disproportionate results. And that's the definition of growth hacking that I use. And the whole science of all of growth sciences actually stems exactly out of that, right? So an example is your ability to actually do that. Now, the wonderful thing about this, Rohit, like look at the tool that we're using today. For me and you to be able to pull off this interview, even as close as 3-4 years ago, this wouldn't be possible, right? You and I would have to physically get somewhere. We would have to get the physical camera set up. And then we do this wonderful interview, and then we would then go out and broadcast it and push it all in all the places, and that would be incremental. 10x is our ability now for us to do this remotely, where you and I don't need to travel. We don't have to make as close the amount of efforts and not even close amount of money and resources required for me and you to have this interview, right? But we're able to do this interview today with all kinds of different technology. And technology is one of the main disruptive components of our ability to do this. And by the way, Steve Jobs also famously, in an interview, was asked about what he thinks about the future of technology. And he says, you got to understand that the root of technology is its inherent ability to amplify a human's ability. And that is the source in which people are able to 10x. So you don't have to be a tech company. I make this very clear to people. You don't need to be a tech guy, don't need to be a tech company, but you need to know how to use it. And that's what it comes down to. Just like the tools that we're using today, which allows you and I to 10x, right? That's what we're pulling off right now. Now, I'm talking, this is super simple, rudimentary example. People probably listening like, dude, that's it. I want to build an empire, right? And yeah, that's what we teach people, how to build your own empire. But these are the simple starting points, and you ask the really right, good questions to get this as simple as possible, so that everybody can understand this.
Okay. So in order for me to 10x, forget about me, it's about the people. In order for someone to 10x, and like you said, it's not about technology. Okay. In order for someone to 10x, what are the requirements? Any prerequisites? Anything, that, oh, no, you can't do it because you don't meet this criteria? Or can anyone and everyone can do it?
See, anyone and everyone can do it. The prerequisite is one thing and one thing only, and that's mindset. Mindset is the most crucial thing here. It's not about the tools because you can obtain them. It's not about the skills because you can also obtain those. And it's not even about the networks because you can obtain those. The resources, everything is obtainable accept the mindset, right? You have to build the mindset. You can't just acquire it. Even if you're out building all your resources, you still need the mindset in order to do that. So in
So
order for you,
what mindset do
yeah,
you need? What kind of mindset do you need? Because I hear this word mindset again and again. I'm like,
yeah,
switch off. Okay. What kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
mindset do you need? Because to me, when you say mindset, it's you're stuck, you're stagnant,
yeah,
you're set in your ways. There's no flow.
yep.
I need clarity on that for the listeners.
Sure. So in my book, I talked about this. So we look at the mindset and we kind of divide it into
Is,
four areas.
could you tell us which particular book one is that for
Yeah.
the
So it's actually here, and this is in the growth
that's
thinking
the one which is in
design.
the 10-day challenge? Yes.
Yeah, that's the one we use in the 10-day challenge. In fact, I'll go find you the page. I should be able to find it here. So we actually break it down. There we go. So don't know if you can see that there, but yeah, is that
Drivers,
clear?
speech, decisions, and tooling. Okay, so you've got four
Yeah.
components there of the
Yeah,
mind.
and these four components are governed by 14 habits. So
Okay.
these 14 habits give me the ability to work with this mindset. So I'll share one example with you, which is one of the most interesting ones, which is curiosity. Okay,
Mm,
so curiosity is super important because curiosity is about where everything starts with, like the why. Like, hey, why does that exist? Why is that not fixed? Why
yeah.
is that not done better? Or where does this come from and why did that happen? You see? And so that level of curiosity, by the way, curiosity is one of these things that is like in today's world is highly canned. Okay. Canned meaning like, why ask those questions? Just Google it. I mean, Google could be part of your research. I get it. But curiosity is about you going into the much deeper understanding of the cause effect relationship.
Mm,
And the better you understand this cause and effect relationship, the more you would know how to work with that cause and effect relationship. And that's why curiosity, for me at least, out of those 14, is probably one of the most important habits. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the most important one for you. That just means I find that to be the most important of the 14 habits for me.
mm,
And that's because I believe that's where the thought process, where the mind looks at these things, helps you get started. And as you know, recently, as I shared with you, one of the most important mindset shifts that I've had actually many years ago, and somebody recently had talked about it, which was Ray Diallo, which I shared with you, which is being okay with being wrong. In fact, you want to be wrong most of the time rather than right, because having mistakes or failures or being wrong is where the real learning comes from. And that's the only place that you can stress test your thinking and take these assumptions that you have, test them out, turn them into rules, and finally have a principle to work with. A principle is a tested assumption
mm,
that works under, regardless of the circumstances, they would consistently give the same output.
mm.
And so the only way to think like that is you need to be ready to be wrong. Or, for example, as you know also about the boardroom ego. Boardroom ego is something that I train on. I had this huge problem working with very large organizations. You walk into a boardroom and everybody sitting there happens to be an expert in everything.
Yes.
And everyone knows there's a problem, but everybody seems to have the answer, but there's no solution, which is ridiculous. And so it's really important that I get everybody on the same page and we start with a statement saying, I don't know. And that blank paper approach where you start by saying, I don't know, kind of lifts off, the weight from literally physically and mentally. And you just feel a little bit more relaxed, and it gets people to start to really think
Mm,
and become curious about how to find the solutions. The beauty of starting, by the way, with the statement saying, I don't know, is the only thing in front of you is experimentation, right? And experimentation is where we're going to really learn where growth comes from, because growth comes truly, as you know, Rohit, from the unknown. If it was known, you would have already done it. That's the
mm,
crazy thing behind it. If your competitor pulled it off and you're going to do the same thing, you're just copying, but you're incremental. You're definitely not 10xing.
mm.
You're just in the shadows of somebody else trying to do the same thing. 99% of organizations and the way people approach things is exactly like that, and
Yes.
that's pretty crazy, man. It's pretty
Okay.
crazy.
So my next question comes up to my next question is, why is that? I mean, from what you're saying, this seems something which every organization, every individual who is in business, not even in business, even if they're in a job or something, can actually do something called 10x. Then
Yep.
why, when we see the marketing of this, why is it being abused? When I say abused, it's misused, it's miscommunicated, it's
Yep.
shown as as a, what's the word? The magic bullet, the
That was a good one.
magic.
Yeah,
And here you are,
yeah.
abracadabra, everything is resolved.
No.
Connect. And my understanding, no, it's not the case. You still need to put the work, the effort, and you have to let it be. So
Yep.
tell me, why is it being abused?
Well, first off, thank you for labeling that, because that's exactly what it is. It's actually a form of abuse. And this abuse starts with one very simple sales principle, is telling people what they want.
Hmm.
And people desire to grow exponentially. Everybody wants to grow. I haven't met anybody that doesn't want to grow, right? And it's really easy to conditions people's minds to like, hey, here's a way you can grow. Just do what I'm telling you, and you'll grow. And I learned this early on. I mean, my whole pursuit and mission, and the purpose of my existence when it comes to growth, as you know very well, is the fact that there's no silver bullet and there's no single success formula. And the reason being is because I'm an exact example of that. I read all the books that didn't really give me what I needed. I listened to all the podcasts that didn't really give me any experience. Hired, some pretty brilliant consultants that just didn't get me results. And so what happened was I just wasn't getting what I needed, as most people do. And I discovered that nobody's going to be able to do it for me other than me. And so I needed to come up with my own formula. And that's when I designed the blueprint, which is actually, as you know, in the first book, which is Ready, Set, Growth Hack.
Hmm.
And this is where you're able to see the blueprint, right? So we teach the blueprint from start to end, how to actually develop your own success formula for growth, or growth formula, right? So when the idea of 10x is being sold, it's essentially being sold to you as like your desire, right? You desire to 10x. You want to 10x. Everybody watching this right now wants to 10x, and that's the what. But it's about the how, and that's what I'm going to dig into now. I mean the how, and as you know as well, as we teach this in the Growth Ninja School. And we have a system in which we do this. We've got approximately 32 measures that we use across 16 processes in 5 phases. And we break it down into just a very simplistic way of doing this. And the way it works is you start with your customer number 1. And from number 1, you jump to your next 10 customers. And then you stop there. And then from your next 10, you go from 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, and you get the picture. Now, the reason is because how you service each one of these increments I just mentioned to you is different. The failure points are different. The principles that are created in order for you to shift from 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000 are different. And when many clients come to me, whether they be just direct clients or people in my 10-day growth hacking challenge, they usually come to me like, yeah, we got these minimalistic results. I've got like 100 clients, or I only got like 50 users or whatever. So I'm like, brilliant. And they kind of get surprised. And I was like, yes, it's not about how big or small that number is. It's like, what can I understand about those 50 customers you got that's going to move me within this increment from 10 to 100? And then once I cross that 100, throughput, what will that look like? And that's where we use the growth sciences, which I was talking about, the 16, the 16 measures and the 5 phases across those throttle points. And those throttle points are the measure. So you can't go from 1 to 1 million customers like that. That's not possible, and that's not going to happen. Can you reach 1 million customers? Depending on the nature of business you're in, of course you can. The other thing that you know very well, we talked about this, which is the difference between a sizable and scalable business. And so you might want a 10x, but you're not 10xable, right? So you just may not be 10xable, and that's because you run a sizable business. This surprises so many of my clients. They walk in and we're scaling, and everything's about scale.
Between sizable and scalable. Difference between sizable and scalable. What is it?
So the difference is sizable is you have constraints. So for example, a perfect example would be a professional business, right? So you're running a coaching business, you're running a consulting business, an accounting business, and every time you need to grow, you need to add on more people, right? And the thing about sizable doesn't mean that you cannot build $1 billion business. By the way, you can make a lot of money being sizable, but you're not scalable. So what's happened is, if you take a look at industries like, the consulting industry, for example, that is built exactly like that, In order for them to scale, they look at how to scale components of their business rather than the whole business, because the whole business is actually sizable, not scalable. So this shocks many people, because everyone thinks, well, we can 10x, and that's usually the starting point of my conversation with clients and people in the challenge. Like, are you sizable or scalable? Let's figure that out. And that's why I'm really big on, and that's not just to have a bias towards this, but I'm really big on SaaS driven companies who use like marginal cost at the core of their business because of technology in order to reach a lot of people, right? And that's why those business models are extremely attractive, and they receive a lot of funding because they're naturally scalable. Yeah.
So I want to close off this talk which we're having. Just three things which people can do or to consider to implement 10x or be in a thought process of 10x. What would be those three major components that people can take away with them?
Well, the first thing would be, you need to come to the realization is that there's no silver bullet or no single success formula. Once your mindset is beyond that, like you accept that, the next thing would be working on your mindset, like things like curiosity and figuring out what those parts are, because it's a huge self-development thing, right? That's where it all starts, because it's all about the mind. After that, I would jump into experimentation. Like, I mean, if you really want to understand what's happening in the world and your place there and how to adjust your offerings so that you can scale, or if you're sizable in that case and you want to, obviously become more sizable, you need to experiment. And experiments need to be really cheap, really fast, really simple, because you're going to do a lot of them. Having a few first failures is never a setback. In fact, that's exactly how it should work. Yeah. And there's organizations. I mean, I always use booking.com as a benchmark. They do 1,000 tests a day. I mean, just to put that into proportion, because people are thinking like, I'm going to do like a test or two a month, or even some larger organizations. I mean, their numbers are just too small. They don't recognize the amount of experimentation required. And it shouldn't be a burden on an organization. In fact, it should be at the core of their culture to experiment, because that's the way forward. That's where they're going to find the growth.
Okay. So just to clarify for the listeners, for the audience, one is there's no magic bullet, there's no magic formula, no abracadabra, and that happens. That's the first.
None of that.
Okay. The second part is the mindset and the 4 components to that mindset. One you talk about is within those behaviors is curiosity. Could you, for the audience, again show that grid to us? So before
sure.
Grid,
let me find that out.
You've got mindset. Curiosity is one of the behaviors, but there are 4 core elements. I think there was tooling, discovery.
There we go.
2 others.
Let's put it there. Is it clear?
So in the mindset, you need to consider drivers, reach, decisions, tooling, and curiosity is part of one of these behaviors within there. Okay.
Yeah. So curiosity cuts across them with the behaviors, right? So there's the 14 behaviors, and you can see here we break it further down.
Okay, great.
So there, and here you go. Here's the 14 behaviors. There you go.
Okay, great. So you've got the 14 behaviors over there. And then after that, what you've got, so you've got there's no magic bullet. There's no abracadabra, boom, poof, it comes up, nothing like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is the mindset, looking at that grid with the 4 options and the behaviors. And the final thing is, or the third thing is experiment, 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 experiment. Okay,
got it.
Those are 3, and this is something which you actually do cover while those people who join you in the 10-day challenge.
Yep. So the core of the 10-day challenge is exactly using this methodology, and we focus exclusively on experimentation and how to use the growth hacking principles so that people can build those muscles within 10 days. So in 10 days, we do 3 growth hacks with the objective to 10x. Very few businesses do it within the 10 days. It's happened. Most of them build foundational growth hacks within 10 days so they can 10x shortly after those 10 days. Some of them have done it within 30 days, some 60 days, and some up to 90 days have managed to do that.
Okay. So to close it off, how do people contact you? How do they contact you and get going on to this, have that, maybe even that initial discussion, or even get into the 10-day challenge, or use your services on 10x? How do they contact you? Where do you go?
So the best place to start is on my website, which is www.nadersabri.com. That's the first starting point. The other place I would point you towards is my YouTube channel. You can just literally type in my name, Nader Sabri, with a Y at the end. And my channel will pop up. Definitely please subscribe. And then you'll find in there, we've got about 3 to 4 seasons total with a lot of content. There's just a lot of learning. We have people who binge watch, which is awesome. They binge watch the challenge. They just sit and just watch, and they learn, and then they start implementing some of the things that they've learned in there. They don't copy it, obviously, but they learn from it and implement it into their own jurisdiction. Their own organization and situation.
And these videos on YouTube are freely available. There's no cost to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
exactly.
They can come and talk to you and have a consultancy meeting with you and progress from there if they need to do a 10x project.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Truly appreciate it, and trust the audience is much clearer on the myths and the lies of 10x and how it's actually meant to be and what it does for you. Thank you everyone for your time. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.